Welcome to Merschman Seeds Cup of Joe. On this episode, harvest has begun and it's time to think about fertilizer. Have you tested the soil in your field? How can you maintain yield potential knowing what's in your field? Dylan shares fungicide trial results from northern Iowa. Ben shares comments on how our Merschman PowerCore Enlist corn is performing, especially our 2512C-30 and 2411C-30. And Ben also shares some Meristem Crop Performance trial work on screen.
Hi, this is Joe Merschman. Welcome to Merschman Seeds Cup of Joe. Today we have Ben, Dylan, and Lynn. And Lynn, I understand you're going to start today.
Yeah, I drew the short straw to talk about something that it's probably not on it is on guys' mind, but probably not one they want to think about too much. But it is, harvest has begun, north-south. So, with depressed commodity prices and fertilizer prices being a little bit higher than we want them to be at, I think it's a great opportunity to go out and spend some money on some soil tests and figure out where your bank's at, essentially. So, most companies, especially when we get into the biological side of stuff, talk about the P1, P2 phosphorus that are out in the field and available phosphorus, and there's this pool that's out there, and there's a lot of statistics depending on your state. You can look that up, and just a lot of availability there that's just needs to be put into a solubilized form for the plant's uptake. So we can only verify things that we can measure. So with that, that's where our soil test comes in. We prefer the Malic 3 test to figure out what our total ratio out there. But as we, like I said, do not want to not fertilize. But I think with these lower prices, if you can get by maybe on a certain field with the bare minimum, or maybe even bank it to the next year and use a product like excavator to make it more readily available through the residue and stuff like hopper throttle through the pail. A good opportunity to have that as you're trying to budget your fertilizer spend for this year. The other one with that too, what I like with soil testing is also to look back at our harvest maps and kind of see if we can see some correlations there when we do some soil testing. If you got a spot that did, let's say, 300 bushel, it's good to look back at that soil test and figure out, hey, like what's going on here? Like, what's my K levels? What's my P levels? How's my calcium to magnesium ratio look? How does copper, zinc, all that kind of, all the whole portfolio there, how does that look and how does that translate? Are you seeing a correlation between different spots? So, if you've got 3 or 4 spots that are yielding the same with the same levels, we're onto something there at that point to then figure out how we need to maintain that yield in those spots and maybe bring some other spots up to that level if you got the capacity. I mean, the part of it too right now would be with that soil testing is also then figuring out what we have to then have a realistic expectation for what we need to feed that crop for next year. If you've got a spot that's really low, this isn't the time to build it up, but it's also a time where we need to set that expectation realistically and figure out what we need to put on for the bare minimum to find a break-even yield in those particular spots. So, like I said, that time of year, crops are coming off. Good time to get that tested and get a game plan for what the plan needs to be as far as fertilizing. One conversation that kind of keeps revolving, and I don't want to neglect it, is guys talking about not fertilizing at all ahead of soybeans, just letting it be what it be. Yes, they are scavengers, but I still think it's important to figure out what you have out there, especially on the K levels. It seems like if we can get K levels really good in soybeans, that allows them the ability to then still produce extremely well. As we've talked about probably ad nauseum with K, drought resistance. Especially in like this year's a prime example, the latter half of the season, I know on my farm areas where I'm struggling with K, and you could see it. I mean, almost to the soil type where they're struggling with the K uptake. So really important on soybeans not to just maybe take the year off, go out and do that. Still potentially soil test if that's part of your rotation on the soybeans, and then definitely on corn, because like I said, that's the one a little more prima donna when it comes to nutrition. The other important caveat there too is it also gives us a benchmark for our nitrogen applications. When we look A at carryover and B, look at the CECs. If you've got a 10 CEC soil and you typically go out at 150 pounds of N out there through anhydrous fall applied, I'd highly recommend you kind of bring that back to that 10-to-1 rule. Put on 100 pounds, come back in and side dress, and make sure that we're not over applying to our CEC and then actually utilizing that nitrogen and not having a risk of it venturing off on us before we get a chance to utilize it.
We'll see if we can get my brother Henry to come on next week and talk a little bit about the fertilizer market to understand it. That may be beneficial to farmers because it's difficult to understand when you look at that cost. And obviously with phosphate, banding, it's 3-to-1 efficiency. So figure out ways to stretch that dollar.
Yeah, and one of the things that I wanted to mention, I don't always agree with the university soil tests and what's going on with I mean, that's broad speaking,
Correct.
Obviously, but the levels that make the most sense are the low levels. So it may be the year that you want to just focus on the low spots that are out in the field and pay for the variable rate application to happen, because I have seen it on personal acres that you get a huge return on investment. Now we're not building the field up to that high yield goal that we're looking at, but if we're just trying to maintain and we're just trying to get by, make sure that you're spending the money on the low to medium low range, because that is where you get 3, 4, 5-fold return on your investment for those acres.
And one that's kind of interesting too to think about, as we've talked about looking at some yield results. As we've had this warmer weather and talking about K, there's also a great opportunity though that we're getting potentially. I haven't seen anything scientific yet, but if you just look at the raw data and the raw numbers of applied N and applied S in comparison to our yield that we're pulling off, we're getting some really good soil mineralization throughout the season. So it kind of stinks from a drought standpoint, but the caveat to that is hot and dry. We are getting a little bit of better soil mineralization instead of that 20 pounds per percent of organic matter. So I think it's really important to keep building your organic matter. Do things that help build that up, because that's kind of our bank for latter terms. So healthy soil will help give you back to that. So I'm not saying get rid of the disc rippers and moldboard plows and whatnot. They have their place, but definitely be conscious as we work our way through these lower commodity. And some of that too, if you don't need to do it. I mean, I've been sitting in the tractor seat looking at 22 gallon an hour pulling a disc ripper. If you don't need to do it, there's a huge cost savings there by letting that thing sit for a year and trying to figure out ways to do more minimum till.
For sure. Dylan, what you got in front of you?
Yeah, so one of our good dealers, Jeff Reintz in Butler County up by Shell Rock, Iowa, always seems to do a fungicide trial, whether it be on soybeans or corn. And in front of me, we've got a corn trial where they did fungicide single pass and then double pass, and the results are kind of mind-boggling on what they saw.
Well, most people knew that fungicide paid, but now we're getting it quantified. And this data, from what we've seen, appears to be pretty mainstream.
Yeah. Yep. So we saw it in the yield and on the moisture side. It seems like it jumped up almost, looks like almost 2-3% between each pass as he went up. So as no fungicide, 207 was the average, and it jumps up 44 bushel to 251 on just one single pass at Tassel with Beltima. And then when he came back, looks like a month later, he got another 9 bushel out of his second pass. So when you're doing the math there, it really looks like it's going to pay off. Like, at least this year, even a 2-pass system in this particular case would have worked out if you're doing your own application or you've got another route of your product.
Yeah, so 9 times 4 would be 36. So if you had to hire it done and you're paying full retail for everything, that's probably close to a break-even pass, depending on which fungicide you use and how expensive your.
And I would say that break-even pass is just part of that's part of the economic side of it. But I think what's going to be really important here as we travel throughout this growing season is we're going to start seeing. We're already seeing stuff fall apart, regardless of brand or genetic backgrounds. That anywhere that had a lot of rain in the month of July Like on our neck of the woods, the 10 plus inches, denitrified, stock quality. This last rain really made stuff turn in a hurry. So anything that helps improve that stock integrity, fungicide, especially if I'm assuming it was a generic on the back end. Sorry,
it doesn't say.
Gotcha. Well, even like running a strobilurin in that for plant health in that last pass to help with that, keep that thing alive and green. That's going to be the difference between having something that's still standing if you cover a lot of acres, or getting the reel out and taking care of stuff. Because after that last rain that we got over the weekend, really starting to see stuff fall apart very, very quickly. And 108 to 116 day, it really doesn't matter. It's all 19-20%. It all just basically shut off at the same time. And the stuff that was struggling before that point is really going to struggle now.
Yeah, and Ben and I were talking prior to start the presentation. We talked about all these issues weeks ago. Weeks ago, we talked about southern rust. It's going to be bad this year. We talked about tar spot.
That one was months ago.
Yeah.
Sorry. Excuse me.
Well, I was trying to be fairly not brag too much,
Okay.
Ben. But
I'm
you're
not
right.
bragging, but we did call southern rust a long time ago.
If you had watched Cup of Joe, there is no surprises when you're in your fields right now looking at the stock issues, because we predicted it. We just know that when you have all this disease build up and all this multiple stresses, the stock's going to take it on the chin. And we had some, they said a recorded wind of 45 mile an hour Monday night in Burlington, Iowa. So we're starting to pay the price.
Yep.
But anyhow, we do try to stay on top of what's coming and try to predict where we're going, because that's important to be ahead of the problem, not behind it. So Cup of Joe is so far on the curve. I guess we'd get an A. So
I would be curious too if that falls, just geographically speaking. I think it probably would fall in a line similar to that storm that we had talked about that came out of Oklahoma, Kansas City, and kind of hit Des Moines and hit that northeast Iowa. Where, I mean, that makes sense why that early-ish application that happened there paid so well. And then you caveat that with an extremely early season, or an early season hybrid that probably doesn't have a lot of natural tolerance because it's not needed. That all those things play a factor into that. But even so, like we've talked about, the 112 to 115 days, 16 days that we know travel south, they're even struggling with southern rust, and it's part of it for this year.
It's going to be interesting when we do the winter meetings and see what the university personnel say, what we've learned from southern rust, and and how detrimental it is, and how much more aggressive we're going to have to be to manage that disease.
All depends on what the year's like and where the rain's coming from.
Yep.
East to west versus coming from the south.
Well, maybe we had year 10 and year 1 back to back. So we're good for another 9 years now.
I'd be okay with that. That kind of ties into some of the things that I'm talking about. Like, I've been on the phone a lot this week, getting a lot of really, really positive comments from growers with how our PowerCore Enlist corn is performing. But I am starting to see some commonality between the different conversations. One of them being that the 2411C30 is taking it on the chin, maybe just a touch harder on the southern rust. Because it was a lot of people's favorite hybrid last year, and this year it may be 20, probably on the high end, bushel off the 2512, and I think that southern rust has a lot to do with it. But it also has to do with how that hybrid fills, and we've done so many episodes on how that hybrid fills. This is why I don't like split planting corn planters, because the 2512, and I actually talked to a customer about this, so this is a whole other story, I'll get back around to it, but the 2411C30 fills in girth and depth, and you want to keep that product alive as long as possible, because that one would be one that would probably pay from a dual application, a two-time application, where the 2512 may just be a break even, kind of like what this one was on your second application, where your biggest bang for your buck is going to be that first application timing. I was talking to a customer that was planting a competitive genetic platform compared to ours, and he had his planter split out, and it was the 2512 versus the different genetic platform, and he said he was seeing a 40 to 50 bushel yield gain going one direction, coming back the other direction when he was in the 2512 because he had the planter split out. He was only seeing like a 10 to 12 bushel yield gain. The 2512 was still outrunning it from a yield perspective, but when he was looking at his untreated check where the airplane didn't spray, he was seeing major yield differences for the competitive platform versus where we are at. So fill style, plant integrity, plant defense to the defense makes it a huge deal, and it's going to be a very interesting year to be picking genetics for the following year, because we're looking at so many different anomalies when it comes to the diseases that we probably shouldn't be planning on. I mean, it's good to have them in the back of your mind because we can defend the yield with different practices, but let's not be leaving the high yielding genetics that have performed over the past 3, 4, 5 years. Let's not be throwing them to the wayside because this product here has a 9 out of 9 for a Southern Rust score, and it was absolutely knockdown drag out this year. But if we get a tar spot, which is probably more common, a tar spot year, that one may fall apart for that individual disease.
Yeah, don't make radical changes. Kind of think of your farming operation like running an aircraft carrier. You just make 1 or 2 degree differences. You can't, because if you start chasing that yield thing and just play, well, whatever is the highest, that's what I'll plant next year. I'll guarantee you that what was the highest this year won't be the highest next year in many cases. It'll still be a good hybrid, but it won't be necessarily the highest. I used to always tell farmers that the variety that did the worst this year is what you should plant next year. And then farmers would always look at me like, are you crazy? And I said, well, that's because next year's conditions are going to be different. And the one that did so well may not have the right conditions. So that's why you got to look at a lot of data, a lot of information, and then you can pick out the ones that are consistently high yields. And I think our 112 day is one of the hybrids that's going to be consistently
in the top of the class.
Yeah, I mean, it was top last year. It looks like it's going to be top this year. So it looks like one that kind of breaks the mold. And many times a hybrid like that only comes along once every 10 years.
Yep, and I'm glad we got it in our bag because I've gotten a lot of really, really positive feedback. A lot of positive feedback over our entire platform, really, over the past week, as guys are definitely getting in and started. Yeah, so just to clarify that the whole conversation we had about the split planter. So we had 2 different hybrids split in a 16-row planter, and we were comparing how those products did in a fungicide situation versus a untreated check. So the fungicide was helping the competitive product by a lot more. The 2512 was still yielding more even in the fungicide and the non-fungicide scenario, but the compared to the untreated check, they were seeing 50 bushel yield gains by the fungicide on the competitive product, where they were only seeing 15 to 20 bushel yield advantage with the 2512. And that being because the 2512 either had a better disease resistance, a different way that it builds yield. There's a couple different directions on all of the above, yeah, potentially there. So that's just one of those things I wanted to re-clarify, because the 2512 was outrunning that other product, but its response to fungicide was not the same. The response to fungicide is much greater for the competitive product than what it was for the 2512.
Yeah, I think that's important to know. We know a lot of guys plant multiple brands, different genetic platforms out there, and it's really, this is like why it's extremely important to get out there in the field, know how those plants build their yield, because you're going to both choose your placement on when you go to buy those hybrids, choose the placement, and then also choose the management. So if you can get a better price on fungicide, something like that product you're talking about from the competition, it has to have fungicide. Get that locked in at a better price and know that you're going to make that pass. So it's a fun year to make those decisions. 2512 has kind of become the easy button, I think, for a lot of guys, just because of the multitude of ways that it has shown its yield capability. We look at the Macomb first trial that came out on it. If it was in the top 10, but actually if you look at it from a revenue per acre, it was number 4. So it brought a combination of really high yield at a less moisture in comparison to the competition. And I venture to say, knowing some of the prices of our competition, that if you actually put the pen to paper and looked at the whole economics of that particular hybrid, it would have been in the top 1 or 2 on a whole farm when you look at it from an enterprise standpoint. So 25-12 is definitely the easy button, but man, if we get a year where we get a good fill period, that 24-11 is one that you can't not have it in the portfolio.
Well, in the 24-13, and a lot of the studies we've been looking at, not a lot of the studies, but I would say about a third of the studies, the 24-13 studies would be the wrong word. I would use the word show plots or testing sites, but 24-13 is right there, neck and neck in the state of Illinois compared to the 25-12. So we have an awesome portfolio. I can't say enough good things about what's coming out of the Corteva platform and what we get to stick in our bags, because it's very, very exciting. Last thing that I wanted to finish out on is I promised some Meristem trial work, and the 2 fields that I really wanted to show have not been harvested yet, but this is one that is harvested and I can throw pictures up of. So what you're looking at is an 80-acre field. We have the legend off on the right-hand side that shows the different yield levels in this field, and on the far right-hand side of the field there's a 90-foot pass. So if you count the different strips that the combine goes up and down, it's about 90 foot, and that is where a dent application of a $5 fungicide, a NKBS, and Revline late season was applied at dent, like fully into dent. So I think when you're looking at what this field looks like, you're seeing a lot of the purples. That's in the 226 to 238 range. And when we get into the dent application pass up against the right-hand side, you're looking at more consistently the probably 262 to 274 range for yield capability there. So completely untreated check, would have had Xyway on it, versus a late fungicide pass with the Meristem products on the right-hand side. Definitely was a positive return on investment, and the grower is extremely happy. Definitely something to be looking at for next year. You see all the really light blues. There's some sand in there, so that's what happens. That's what happens when you farm sand. It's kind of hard to keep things alive when it doesn't rain and you don't have irrigation. So, and there's a blue stripe down the center there too. That was combine operator wasn't running at full throttle. So if you're wondering what those blue spots are, that's what we're looking at. So we'll have more data to share next week, I'm sure.
Packing in the sugars.
Yep.
Okay, well, I got 3 jokes for you, and we'll see what you think. I noticed that some of the folks on the different social media platforms, when they tell corny jokes, they get up and run out of the room, after they tell them.
We want to.
No, I'm talking to the person that's telling it, because the other ones want to beat him up, So, yeah, let's don't get violent here, okay?
Have to worry about Dylan. He's the violent one of the group.
Yeah. Well, I've been doing a little thinking, and I realize that people are actually prisoners of their phones. You ever thought about that? Everybody's on their phone all the time. That's why they call them cell phones. Okay. Okay.
You said the jokes would be better this week.
Okay. Now, this is for the ladies, okay? What do you call 2 guys hanging from a window? What do you call 2 guys hanging from a window? Kurt and Rod. Kurt and Rod. That's really dumb, isn't it? Anyhow, this one is for the kids. You always got to have one for the kids, Okay. What kind of shoes do chickens wear? What kind of shoes do chickens wear? Reebok!
I'm telling Warren that one.
Well, I told you, at least I had one decent one. The chicken jokes always go over well. Anyhow, thanks for watching this week. We sincerely appreciate your business. We hope that your family is healthy and safe, and we'll see you next week.